Sisters and brothers, ladies and gentlemen, friends, neighbors, comrades, all citizens of the world, wherever you're going, wherever you've been, and wherever you're at, we welcome you to the Live from the Heartland show here on YouTube. New episodes air every Friday at 9 a.m. Central Time with individual interviews posted throughout the following week. I'm your host, Michael James, encouraging you to take the chain from the brain to get back in the people's game, because it's time to move from the lower level to the higher, from the shallower to the deeper, from the one-sided to the many, and from the abstract to the concrete. So without further ado, let's get it on. Welcome, all you citizens of the world. It's time for another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. I'm Michael James, your host today, and this is our show for the week of February 14th. And speaking of February 14th, we'd like to wish everybody a very happy Valentine's Day weekend. Our guests today are going to be Marguerite Horberg, talking about concerts for Cuba and her recent trip to Cuba. The Hollywood director Andy Davis talking about the late, great Gene Barge, who just passed away. And cousin Adam James from California with his sports report post-Super Bowl. So once again, happy Valentine's Day weekend. After all, we're going to need a lot of love to carry us through what appear to be some dire times, both at home and abroad. Think about it a little bit. We're in a battle to protect America from attacks from within. They continue. There's continuing shutdown of services and challenging the legal order. Think about bird flu and bird flu spreading to cattle and the withdrawal of funding from the Center for Disease Control and withdrawing from the World Health Organization. This guy Trump has appointed as his co-president, this guy named Musk, and in the Oval Office earlier this week, Musk made a lot of false claims about saving money, none of which have been backed up. It does appear that we're in for a long period of Trump fighting the law, and big question is, will the law win? He fought the law. Will the law win? We are hoping the law wins in this case. I've been thinking about it a lot, as have a lot of people, about what we do. And at this juncture, I'm just going to say that activists, organizers, all people of conscience, we have to dig in. We have to be in this for the long haul. We have to make a lot of phone calls, show up for a lot of demonstrations. And on that note, last week I went to one that Indivisible held at the Federal Building. Indivisible, if you connect with them online, will send you a daily announcement of where action is taking place. So we also need to stay in touch and in contact with our friends, with our relatives, our family, and continually share news that's important, share opportunities. And one of the things I always like to include, because it encourages a good attitude going forward, is to keep working on ourselves, whether that be yoga, meditation, weightlifting, swimming, walking, running. You do it. You'll feel better, and you'll have a better attitude to stand up to the dire situation that now confronts the country that we have loved, even though we've had plenty of criticisms. On the good front, standing up for what's right. The guy who owns, the co-founder of Melville House, a publishing company, is publishing Jack Smith and the Tulsa Reports. He says, I was stunned by Donald Trump's return. He is Dennis Johnson, and he saw a chance to hit back by publishing official reports into these shameful episodes in U.S. history. You can check it out. Go to Melville House, and you'll learn more. I came across a really interesting website. It's called Good News for Humankind, the world's latest milestones for climate, justice, freedom, health, and more. The actual website is peterschulte.org, Peterschulte. I've been following it, and he really has a lot of interesting things. For those of you who are concerned about immigration and ICE and people coming into our neighborhoods, last week we had Gabe Gonzalez and Torrance Gardner, the founders of Protect Rogers Park. They talked about immigration, migration, ICE, and our response. And also last week, if you're into sports and important sports figures you don't know much about, our friend, the track coach Jim Canadle, came on and he talked about his new book, The Genius of Ted Hayden and the University of Chicago Track Club. With all that said, we're going to go on, have a little bit of music from Cuba. And we'll have our first guest, Marguerite Horberg, who's going to talk about Concerts for Cuba, her recent visit to Cuba, and some events that happened on the way back. We'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland. Welcome back, all you citizens of the world. This is Live from the Heartland for the week of February 14th. And leading up to this coming weekend, I received a lot of emails from the HotHouse, a wonderful venue here in Chicago founded by Marguerite Horberg. And in the last, she's talking in the email, in the last few months, there have been a lot of cyclones, flooding, earthquakes, power outages, devastating consequences for the people of the island of Cuba. We still have an American embargo and a lot of other countries in there on that. And they basically have always tried to bring Cuba to their knees. There's always been a lot of people, not only in Cuba, with a lot of resilience, but people on the outside giving support. Marguerite has been one of those people. And I invited her on to talk a little bit about her upcoming series, Concert for Cuba. And here she is. So good morning to you, Marguerite.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for always having me come on to talk about Cuba. I appreciate it. So we started this initiative as a national project. And originally, there were going to be cities across the country hosting a concert on the same day. And we are now 3 cities on February 16th, which is this Sunday: New York at the People's Forum, HotHouse at Constellation, and in the Bay Area at a place called the Chapel. And the 3 venues came together, 3 presenters, to try. Originally, our goal was to raise about $200,000 to buy parts for the electrical grid and for medical supplies. And so we've designated 2 partners. One is Global Health Partners, which regularly sends containers, shipping containers to Cuba with massive amounts of material aid, and the People's Forum, which has also been able to send significant amounts of aid through shipping containers. So those 2 recipients will be receiving all the proceeds from these 3 concerts that are happening on Sunday. Then there's a part 2, which is we're recording the concerts and re-editing them for a live stream on April 5th so that people can watch from around the world and also contribute with donations to the same recipients. So it's a pretty elaborate project. There's about 100 people involved in Chicago. We're super grateful for all the musicians who are donating their time and talent, and to the venue Constellation, which is donating the venue to us.
Let me just get straight here. So there are live concerts Sunday, the 16th in San Francisco, in New York, and in Chicago. And then the online concert is not at the same time. It's going to be on April 5th.
Correct. And
Okay.
in Chicago, we have Grupo Cha Cha, which is led by Lisa Gilly, Norberto Guerra, and Charlie Mejias. And then James Sanders has put together the Proyecto Libre Super Band with some of our favorite musicians like Ed Wilkerson and Fred Jackson and Ari Brown and James Sanders. And we're bringing a special Cuban conguero coming from Madison, who's going to be with the guys. And also Joe Rendon, who everybody loves from his Congo playing, conguero. So we have a bunch of elected officials coming to give remarks, including the Commissioner Anthony Quesada from Cook County, Byron Citro Lopez, Joe Ricard from SEIU, and Maggie Civet. And we're also showing an exclusive to our concert, a new video made by Belly of the Beast to talk about the holistic situation in Cuba right now.
What time is the concert at the Constellation Room on Sunday?
Doors open at 8, concert's at 8:30, and it's at 3119 North Western, which is near Belmont and Western. Tickets are online through Constellation. You can buy either the live concert ticket, or you can also buy a ticket to watch the live stream of the concert Sunday.
So, Marguerite, just to sum it up, we've got concerts for Cuba taking place here in Chicago at the Constellation Room on Sunday at 3119 Northwestern. And I used to love going over that bridge that was there. It's gone now. But the Constellation Room is still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this will be this Sunday, and then people who miss the concert can always hook up and see it on April 5th online. And you talked a little bit about, raising money to ship containers to Cuba. What's the actual status of that? And then talk a little bit about Cuba. I mean, can people travel freely to Cuba still? I went in through Canada in different ways in the times I've been to Cuba. I thought people could travel there legally now. And what's the situation with, I know things are in dynamic change mode these days, but on shipping containers to Cuba?
It's a little above my pay grade. I just watch, I get news all day, and it seems like I just got something 15 minutes ago where they cut all remittances to the island. So I'm not really an expert on all the nuances of, how the U.S. tries to, hamper trade and just travel. It's not my area of expertise. But
tell us a little bit about your just most recent trip to Cuba. I'm actually still completely flabbergasted about what happened to me because, over the years, we know of many people who've been detained at the airport, not only from Cuba, but from other places. And they're asked questions, and usually they're released after people are satisfied. My situation was many, many more degrees of apprehension. Like I was put in a room without a lawyer. I was told the border has no legal rights anymore. There's no Miranda rights. You don't have a right to a phone call or access to a lawyer. Nobody knew where I was. I wasn't told why I was there, how long I was going to be there, when I would be, released, and nobody knew where I was. And so it was a really cold room. I was wearing summer clothes. I got kind of sick from that experience. They confiscated both of my telephones. They said they were investigating what was on my phone. They didn't exactly say
what would satisfy them. And after 5 hours, I was able to leave, but they still kept my two phones, and I have no idea like what data they, took or what they're going to do with it. And I find it really disturbing that, I had no purpose. There was no reason to apprehend me. I have no arrest record. I have all my family goes back 3 generations of being born in this country. My papers are in order, etc. So, I mean, just to sum up, it's, this idea that the border is kind of a civil rights free zone was really kind of an eye opener to me. And I just feel like I'm obviously a white woman, middle class business owner, no arrest warrant, and I just feel like if they have so much impunity to take me, the people who have far less resources or are profiled in a different way are much more targeted and without recourse. I mean, I feel like I have no recourse because I haven't found a lawyer who can really represent me. I think lawyers are just overburdened right now.
Right.
And so,
what did they say anything to you when they let you go? Did they?
No, I mean, when I asked them why I was there, they said you won the lottery. So who knows what that means? It's like clearly I didn't win the lottery. I mean, and my real fear is that because we have consciousness about how the U.S. empire works and how what's happened to people. Like we know that they can manufacture cases against people, and we know that they're oftentimes not based on any kind of real something real. So I'm just personally, I'm afraid, that I don't want to be on a list. Nobody wants to be on a list.
Well, Marguerite, you go back and forth to Cuba pretty regularly, and I would imagine they know that you are a key organizer in Cuba support entertainment events here in the country. You brought Cuban bands, as did I, to the Heartland, and it's really a wonderful place. I mean, it's really suffered a lot, but I've been there only I think 2 or 3 times. The last time I went, they asked me if I had gone anywhere besides the Bahamas, and I said, yeah, I went to Havana, and they said, well, go over there. And I had a really nice border guard lady who's turns out her husband is Cuban. And I said, do you get a lot of Americans going to Cuba? She said, oh, yeah, all the time. Fisher,
yeah, I mean,
old guys.
Well, this trip to the Jazz Fest, there were maybe 100 people from Chicago. Or Orbit Davis was performing at the festival with the Chicago Jazz Philharmonic. He brought a big crowd, and WDCB Public Radio brought a big crowd. So, I mean, all of us are traveling legally. We have licenses to travel. We're obeying, 100% of the law. And, it's just kind of, we're in a moment, as everyone knows, of just kind of lawlessness. And I would just say, that one of the things that I don't think is talked about enough is how, Cuba is basically an African island in large part. And they have like an outsized contribution to culture in the world, which makes it particularly compelling to go and, see the art that's made in Cuba because it's pretty extraordinary. And 2, I mean, just the idea of how African people have been separated in the diaspora and that the U.S. feels also a compunction to keep Africans from, communicating with each other, which is another faction of this embargo and this kind of the way that the U.S. behaves. Is just, from an abolitionist point of view, I think it also should be challenged. And I mean, I just think we have the right to have friends where we want to have friends. And I happen to have family there, and I happen to have a lot of friends there. And, I don't like to speculate, like, give the US any pretext for, you know, like, I don't like to say, oh, yeah, obviously, because I go there all the time, I should be on some list. No, I shouldn't be on any list because everything I do is legal. And so I don't like to give an end to this idea that, somehow some people should be profiled, because I don't think that's right.
Marguerite, let me ask you, while you were there, can you tell us, cite any things you saw, any happy things, any sad things? It's definitely a country that's been in the pressure cooker since 1959.
Yeah, it's really just extraordinarily difficult. I mean, even these trips we take, which emphasize, like, you eat in a good restaurant, you go to the festivals, it's all run very well. You can have a wonderful tourist experience in Cuba if you have dollars. But the rest of the country is not living in that, fool's paradise. And people are really suffering. Some days there's no water, there's no medicine. My friends took a train 24 hours from Guantanamo to meet me in Havana, just so they could take back, 400 pounds of medicine to take back to Guantanamo, because that part of the island just doesn't have anything. And, people are really disgruntled. They feel like Cuban government could do more. They're tired of the Cuban government. It's exhausting. And living there is exhausting. But I have to say that in spite of all that, it's just amazing, like, how that country functions, even with all, how hard it is to live there. And, people are very educated, people are very hospitable, and there's very little crime. But it's just heartbreaking to see, like, with all of these advances that Cuba has made in education and medicine and social organization, that there's still, like, just this object of so much, basically sadistic policy. And it's just something I think we all have to reject. Like, it's
Well,
just
let's
not.
see if we could help by turning out some people for your event that's coming up on Sunday, the 16th. Why don't you tell us one more time what time it starts, what the address is, where it's at, and who's going to be playing this Sunday?
Thanks, Mike. Okay, Sunday, February 16th.
Great Lakes Dragway, you're in Chicago talking about Cuba concert.
Sunday, February 16th at 8. Doors open at 8. Concert 8:30. Constellation. Tickets at Constellation on the website, 3119 Northwestern. We will also be selling T-shirts and photographs and other stuff to raise money. T-shirt designed by beautiful Jaime Garza. Lots of volunteers. You guys come. All the money, 100%, goes to Global Health Partners and People's Forum. There'll be ways to donate if you can't come. You can watch the concert online by buying a ticket at Constellation. It'll be live streamed. And, it's really a way to get together with people. It's very important in these days to have social, to have fun, to have music, to remember all the good things in life. And this is a great way to celebrate each other with a little side of defiance.
Well, I hope I see you there Sunday. I usually fall asleep by 8 o'clock.
Yeah,
but I'm going to try to make it.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it always.
Yeah,
Michael.
you keep up the good work. There's Cuba's a wonderful place. It's, as you pointed out, it made a lot of contributions, musically, sports-wise, health-wise, all kind of ways. It is definitely an island of highly educated people and in pretty good health too, I think. And it's a neighbor to the south that we have abused for too long. So with all that said, we're going to hear some music. You all don't go too far away from the left end of your dial or however you're getting this edition of the Live from the Heartland show for the week of February 14th in the year 2025.
Don't you know that I danced to the water the street. I really had that night with Daddy G. He was swinging on the sax with the girls of two, and I was dancing all over the room. Don't you know the people were dancing like they were ready? The swingingest band they had ever had, and the swingingest song they could ever be. It was a night with Daddy G. Let me tell you that I never had it so good. Yeah, I know you never did. Until you get that pedal with that jive, and take a man like the Church Street Five. Don't you know that I danced till the quarter to three. When they had that night with Daddy G, everybody was as happy as they could be, 'cause they was singing with Daddy G.
Okay, you citizens of the world, it's back to Live from the Heartland for the week of February 14th. I'm Michael James, and last week I brought you the sad news that our friend Gene Barge, the great musician from Chicago, well, originally he's from the East Coast, had passed away. And I was fortunate to get to know Gene through working in Andy Davis films. And Andy Davis, who is our next guest, I first heard his name when I was I was at the Towel Station at the Lincoln Belmont Y back in 1976 or so. And somebody said, "Hey, Andy Davis is looking for you." I said, "Who's that?" And it turns out you were making that movie Stony Island and you thought I was a left-wing hillbilly. I said, "I'm left-wing, but my dad produced plays." And he said, "It doesn't matter." And we've been friends ever since. And I've worked in most of your films. And in working in your films, I got to work alongside Gene Barge. And Gene Barge was a wonderful guy who you know well. So I've asked you to come on to share some information, some stories, some memories of Gene Barge. So good morning to you, Andy, out there in California, and glad you're with us today.
Michael, it's good to see you. And hello, Hal, who's our engineer today. And I've had a long, great relationship with Michael going back to Stony Island. I needed to create a character who was a son of a bitch uncle to a young sax player. And it was based upon a character that Haskell Wexler had created in Medium Cool about Appalachians living in Uptown. So I needed to know it. So I knew Michael had been working with Rising Up Angry and had been in Uptown working with all kinds of kids. And so I figured that since he had the right politics and he could probably behave like an Appalachian who just came up from the South, he would be good for the part.
Well, thank you. And I'm grateful, and I still talk about it.
Yeah. And it's funny because I remember he was in Under Siege. He was in Stony Island. He's got several of my other films. And he has one line in The Fugitive, and we cut him out of the picture, didn't get shown, but I hope you're getting a residual from that one line.
I get residuals, yeah. I basically said, "Hey,
there's someone down here
over here. I need a paramedic." And then when we're carrying him out, I say, "Hang in there, brother. We're going to get you out of here."
That's Michael's voice.
12 days in North Carolina.
Guy wants to know what Gene looks like from The Fugitive. When Harrison's being interrogated by Ron Dean and Joe Casala, Gene comes in. He's a detective, and they hand him a report. And he says, "Oh, my. Her skin was under his fingernails, and all this kind of information that thought that Harrison was involved in killing his wife." And then they say, "Book him." So Gina Barge, Gene's daughter, tells me that people used to recognize him on the street just from that profile shot of him, Anyway, Gene Barge was a legend. He was a wonderful, sweet man. He came from Norfolk, Virginia. He had a family that was from the Southeast. He was interested in music as a kid, and he was in the Air Force, I think, I don't know, Army Air Corps. I don't know if they had the Air Force. It was right after World War II, or right down that time. And he was, he started playing in bands in the Southeast. And then he developed this talent. Richie, my brother, calls him the father of country soul sax playing.
Right.
And he had great admirers like, Bruce Springsteen and Chuck D and Clarence Clemens. They all thought he was great because Gene played on Chuck Willis's CC Rider, which was a huge hit. And there's a great sax solo in it. And then Gary, the U.S. Bonds, there was a group called Gary the U.S. Bonds, and he played the solos on Quarter to Three and a bunch of other songs. He played at Daddy G. That was Gene Barge. Daddy G was his nickname, see? And then he wound up coming back to the Midwest or South. He worked at Stax Records for a while, and then Chess Records brought him to Chicago to arrange and produce. And he produced huge artists. I mean, his Muddy Waters he produced Buddy Guy, and his rhythm section at one time was amazing. It was Donny Hathaway on keyboards, Maurice White, who started Earth, Wind, and Fire on drums, Phil Upchurch, the genius session player, bass player who George Benson hired to be his guitar player, and on bass and guitar, and Minnie Riperton sang background. So Gene had this incredible group of people at Chess, and he would help arrange and produce. And he also brought in all kinds of different arrangers and things like that became very famous in their own right. The guy, Charles Stepney, who wound up doing all the arrangements for Earth, Wind, and Fire, was someone that Gene brought in to Chess. So anyway, he was married to a wonderful woman named Sarah, who was his second wife. And he had a couple kids. His daughter, Gina, is a dear friend of mine who's been arranging all these events. And for his memorial, there's a big memorial on Monday at 7 o'clock at the Promontory, which is a club in Hyde Park.
5311 South Lake Park.
Yeah.
311.
My brother's great band, the Chicago Cats, are going to be the house band, and a lot of great artists are going to come and sit in and play. So people should come. But anyway, Gene was beloved. He was like, you have him on the set. And, whether it was Harrison Ford or Tommy Lee Jones or something like that, everybody revered this guy because he was such a sweetheart and he was sort of a legend. I remember we were doing The Fugitive and we were shooting at the Hilton. And, we'd take a break for lunch and everybody was pretty burned out by then. We were at the end of our shoot. And so right around the corner from the Hilton was Buddy Guy's Legends, right? And Gene Barge knew Eddie Bo, who was friends with the Buddy, and he knew Buddy. And I had, get Tommy Lee Jones back here. We got to shoot, Anyway, so
is that when you met Eddie Bo, or did you already? Because Eddie's another guy that appears in your movies, and
Eddie Bo was a Teamster, and he worked doing driving, and he had such an incredible look that I put him in several movies, and. And he's a sweetheart. I hope I get to see him.
Hey, Andy, how did you first meet Gene or first hear about Gene?
Well, there's a guy named Chuck Stepner who I guess was at his funeral, who I'm sure will be there Monday, who was a producer of commercials promoting CBS television shows. And he had done some work with Gene. I think Gene did a beer commercial with him once, right? We played the sax or helped produce the songs. And he knew I was making this movie. I don't know how I met Chuck. In LA, and he said, well, I needed an older mentor character, right? And he recommended Gene, and I met him. And at the time I met Gene, he had just finished producing and helping arrange the first Natalie Cole album.
Because I remember in Stony Island, there were a bunch of Natalie Cole people, musicians that had been played on that album, I think.
Yeah, Tennyson Stevens, Larry Ball, Winnie Barnes, Donnell Hagen, Chris Johnson. A lot of them were working with Gene at that time. And Larry Ball was a kid who I think went to DuSable or Dunbar, and he was like a young Duke Ellington. He was an arranger. He was a savant, and he wrote a couple songs with Tennyson that we put in the movie that Gene played on. Anyway, so that's how I met Gene. And over the years, we just kept in touch. I remember when we did Under Siege, another film Michael's in, time is money. And And, and I remember that Gene, we did a session with, we created a band that was going to be playing on this battleship. They were part of the guys who took over the battleship, right?
Right.
Jones's band was called Bad Billy and the Bail Jumpers, right? And Gene, we did a session one day in Mobile, Alabama, with my brother's band and Todd Robinson, this great singer, and and Gene was there with Tommy, and it was really a hoot to see all them all working together.
Well, those were some fun times working on your movies. What's your fondest memory of Gene? If I could pick it to you.
Oh my God.
Whether it was a performance, I mean, I remember the performance in Stony Island where he is playing the saxophone and wanders off and passes away. I don't want to give it away for the people who haven't seen it.
There was a song called "Song for Percy," and it was, we did everything live. It wasn't playback at all, and he just, he knew this was going to be his last thing. And this young Appalachian kid that you were the uncle to, George England Jr.,
beat him up bad. It's terrible. I feel terrible watching it.
Takes the solo over from Gene, but Gene nailed it. It's a beautiful solo.
Andy, I want to thank you for coming on. I know you're going to be at Promontory Point on Monday the 17th. That's 5311 South Lake Park for concert memorial for Gene Barge. And I would be amiss if I didn't say that it was great to see you recently when you showed up with your new book called Disturbing the Bones that you and our other pal Jeff Biggers wrote. And you know me, I'm hoping that you make a movie out of that. And I know it started that way. We'll see what happens. But how's the progress on the book, Andy?
Well, it's getting wonderful reviews. It's very hard to tell how many copies it's sold at this point, But I just want to thank you, Michael, because you introduced me to Jeff Biggers, whose family also moved to Uptown from Southern Illinois and Kentucky. And he became a wonderful writing partner with me on this interesting political thriller that's very relevant today in terms of what's going on in the sadness of what's going on in the world today. But it's a good political thriller, and I want to thank Michael for introducing me to my new partner.
Well, I'm certainly hoping that they do make a movie because I know you're going to need some old withered guy, and I'm getting there. So I'll see you on Monday night, Andy. It's great to see you on Zoom. I like seeing you in person. Everybody else, stay tuned here on the left end of your dial. We're going to play a little Gene Barge going out, and then we're coming back in with cousin Adam James, who's also been in some of Andy's movies, and we're going to talk sports. Post-Super Bowl, here comes baseball. We got basketball. We got volleyball. Be right back with more Live from the Heartland.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, all you citizens of the world, it's time for the finale of Live from the Heartland for the week of February 14th. And once a month, I bring on Cousin Adam. Played football at Northwestern, worked in some of the same movies together. He's a trainer, a producer, and an actor with a new TV or online series called Doc Savage, Man of Copper. And Adam, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Super Bowl and post-Super Bowl, a little bit about Here Comes Baseball. We got basketball and a bunch of other things. Let's start with the Super Bowl and maybe go to the diciest segment of the Super Bowl, which was halftime. What do you got? And good morning down there in California.
Great to see you. And hello, everybody in the Heartland. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be here. So the Super Bowl was just this last weekend. And while the game wasn't great, it was a great event. One of the most watched television events ever, the most watched Super Bowl ever, an amazing result as far as the success of this event. It's grown over the years. A dear friend of mine who I've known for many years passed away now, a gentleman named Wendell Niles. He was very close with Hunt, and he actually went to the very first Super Bowl. So his family was posting some photos back in 1966 when Lamar Hunt called him up and said, I can't get enough people to go to the game. Can I give you 25 tickets? Will you bring the whole family? So Wendell took photos with his whole family going to the Super Bowl at the Rose Bowl that year. What amazing change over the years.
Yeah,
now,
what are the tickets? What did they cost this year?
They were $12 in 1966, and now they're like, what is it, $5,000?
I went in '85 down to the Super Bowl when the Bears won in New Orleans, and I think Dave Megasy got me the tickets, but I think they were only $70 then. Very
cool. Well, that of course is one of the great sports teams in history, not only great football teams, but the 1985 Bears. The Bears, what a great team, a great organization. Let's get back there, right, Chicago? Now, in regards to Super Bowls, I will just on a quick personal note, my dad actually went to the number 7 Super Bowl, which was in Houston and played at Rice University Stadium. And I remember I was 7 years old at the time. And I remember my mother saying, your dad's at the Super Bowl. And I was like, I'm going to watch this for the rest of my life.
And you do.
Exactly. And I will say that one of the best parts of this Super Bowl was the halftime show, as it's often become the case. And a lot of people were, taking it in different ways. But I'll tell you, I thought it was fantastic. It was a great show. It was very well performed, very well produced. And I will mention, because a lot of people have been creating some controversy about the halftime show, some people pointing out that they preferred it when you had a marching band. Well, in 1966, at the first Super Bowl, they did have a marching band, and they did all the way until the early 90s. They would have a marching band or some, various local entertainers performing. But in 1992, there was a very popular television show called In Living Color, which was a bunch of young African-American, Black entertainers, comedians, musicians. They had a young Jim Carrey performing on that show, but Jamie Foxx and the Wayans brothers, a young Jennifer Lopez as one of the dancing performers, and they had hip-hop performers every week. And what In Living Color did in 1992, Fox Television at that time didn't have football, and they were determined to get in on that party. So they put on a halftime show of their own on their own channel. Right when it went to halftime in the Super Bowl, Fox went live with In Living Color, and they captured a massive audience. And the Super Bowl decided, the NFL decided, we're never going to let that happen again. In the very next year, what did they do? They came out with Michael Jackson. They had Michael Jackson as the halftime show. They made it like a little mini concert within this Super Bowl game, and they never looked back. And over the years, it's been a variety of different acts. Everybody from the Rolling Stones to, Bruno Mars and a variety of other performers. But it's usually been, a group of kind of what we'd call legacy performers, classic rock or well-known performers that have been around for a long time and maybe not so popular right now, certainly not necessarily with the major NFL fan base, and certainly not with the type of people that are the players of the NFL. In other words, the Black community. So over the last few years, they've actually really strived to embrace that. They had an amazing performance here in Los Angeles with all of the performers from, the Los Angeles area, with Dr. Dre leading the way. And it was a tremendous show. And this year they went with this phenomenal artist, Kendrick Lamar. Whether you like that type of music or not, you got to give it up to the amazing success that this young man has had. He's a multi-millionaire, sold tons of albums, and the music community has embraced him as somebody truly special. He's won not one, not two, but 22 Grammy Awards. He is a true genius of musical talent, and his performance was special. It was a revolutionary statement. He was putting on a clear statement to America and to the world of what's going on for a lot of these young Black people in our country, and a lot of people in general. So I thought the show was really terrific. Great job by Kendrick Lamar and the NFL.
And I think I couldn't decide who to root for, but before that show, I looked up and saw that Mahomes' wife and his mother are both MAGA people. He's kind of walked a very careful line about it. But Philadelphia was a different deal. Philadelphia they're not MAGA. That's the part of Pennsylvania that did go blue. And I did see the Rolling Stones at the Super Bowl in Detroit. I think it was Seattle played what do you
Pittsburgh.
call it? Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Yeah, I was at that one, and I remember Mick Jagger dancing around. So that's the Super Bowl. No more football. I'm tired of
Yes, sir.
football till next year. Here comes baseball, but first, a little bit on basketball. We had some big trades going on. The Bulls,
Indeed.
really, the Bulls, 1 minute, I think they're going to really break through with the youth, and the next minute they get slaughtered by Detroit.
You know, the NBA is an interesting product. It's an interesting business because it's very top heavy in regards to talent and performance. In other words, if you have one of these players who just is a transcending player, it really affects your overall team's prospects. There's a saying within the business side of the NBA: you're either great or you're terrible. You don't want to be in the middle. It's not a good place to be as the mediocre team. You'll never get a shot at drafting one of those superstar players. Those superstar players will never come into your city when they're a free agent. If you're not a great team, you might as well tank and see if you can get a high draft pick. And by the way, this upcoming draft for the NBA is going to have some amazing players, several of them, not just this one guy from Duke who everybody's talking about, but there's like 3 or 4 guys that are all really great. They're going to have a big impact on the team they go to. So the Chicago Bulls are in a tough spot, and they will be for a while. It's unfortunate for Chicago basketball fans, but it's just the reality. As bad as people feel for the Chicago Bull fans, you got to feel really bad for the Dallas Maverick fans. I mean, good God. Here in Los Angeles, I've been living here for a good 20 years. I've become a bit of a Lakers fan, and Laker fans are in heaven. This was an unbelievable trade that happened just last week. The Lakers were able to pull off a trade privately, very behind the scenes with the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas Mavericks had a tremendous player from Europe, Luka Doncic, who is really an interesting story. As a young child, he showed a tremendous talent. So by the time he was a teenager, a young teen, 14, I was 15, he was already signed to play in the Pro League. By 16, he was in the European Professional League playing against men. By 18, he was named the best player of that league and won the whole championship, being the MVP of the league and the MVP of the championship. And he came over to the NBA. And during his time in the NBA, he's done nothing but win, win, win. Now, he's a kind of a bigger player for his position, and he tends to play at a slower pace. And some people think it's slow or lazy. And he definitely has had some weight issues over the last few years. So that apparently is what the Dallas Mavericks were uncomfortable with going forward. Signing him to a max deal was the long-term prospects for his health and conditioning and his attitude, all of which makes little sense. The guy has done nothing but play nonstop and played very well. So they traded him. Lakers got him. They had a revealing party the other night. It was lights out. It was phenomenal. I really respect and appreciate LeBron James and how he's handled it. He's the star of this team, but rather than feeling, I got to share the spotlight here, he has embraced it, and he's pushed Luka to the front of the stage. And in fact, on the night that they were getting ready to, reveal Luka, he said, I want you to go last. I want you to be introduced last. And he also leaned into him in that little huddle, and he said, just be yourself. Don't try to fit in. Fit the F out. He was just basically saying, don't walk eggshells around here and try to figure out where you fit in. Just go play, do your thing. So,
well, I don't know what. Yeah, I know that Andrew Davis is from Chicago. He did go to a charter school, not my favorite, but we only have a couple of minutes.
Yes, sir.
So give us a little bit on baseball season. I know that all over the news here, the Cubs catchers and pitchers and whole team, I think, have arrived. The White Sox are coming in. The White Sox had a terrible year. The Cubs didn't do so hot either. So I'm kind of rooting for both teams, but my passion is for the White Sox.
Yes, indeed. And this is the time of year that people get, excited about the possibilities. You look at the prospective lineup, you look at these players that have been coming up through the minor league, you read their history, you think about what they can become. It's exciting, and I do appreciate that. There's also this weird thing that's happened in sports lately, where there's this real top-heavy push. And as excited as people can feel about the Chicago 2 baseball teams, there is one team that is going to move the needle in this sport this next year, and they already moved it, and they're going to move it again, and that's the Dodgers. The guy they signed out of Japan, they signed this pitcher who is lights out. And this other guy, Shohei Ohtani, who's already done the 50-50, he's going to start pitching again this year. The Dodgers are loaded from top to bottom. Oh, and then they also signed the best reliever in the National League. I mean, the rich get richer. It is exciting for Dodger fans, but I would imagine for many baseball fans in general, and certainly smaller market teams, it's a little disheartening to look at that. But, that's capitalism. He signed with the team he wanted to. Coming out of Japan, he could have signed anywhere. And this is what he chose. So, God bless America. God bless baseball.
Well, Adam, we're going to have another sports report next month, but do you want to give us a 30-second health tip as you've been doing monthly for a while?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So this is the time of year that people are starting to get excited about their own health and fitness and working out. And I highly recommend it. Exercise, it should be a lifelong thing. You should be constantly working out. It makes you look better. It makes you feel better. It makes you perform better. And whatever it is that you're doing, the one thing I always encourage people to do when you start working out is talk to somebody who really knows what they're doing. Personal training is a very established enterprise in our community. There's great personal trainers all over. They're not hard to find. You just kind of have to look and ask. Almost every trainer will give you a free first session, a free first workout, a free consultation. They'll sit down and tell you some of the things you should and shouldn't be doing. Take them up on a session or two. I recommend doing a couple of workouts with a professional trainer. Everybody's got a coach. Michael Jordan had a coach. We get better when we work under the guidance of somebody who knows what they're doing and they can see you from outside of yourself. Sometimes it's hard to know whether you're doing things perfectly or correctly or as best as you can if you don't have somebody standing there telling you.
Well, I'm going to have to do it with you via Zoom because you could be my coach. So I want to thank you, Adam James, for coming on. See you next month, if not before. And I want to thank our engineer, Hal James, our first two guests, Marguerite Horberg, Andy Davis, as well as Adam James. And I want to thank my advisory board or the central committee, whatever we call it, which includes Katie Hogan, Tom Clark, and Lynn Orman. Y'all do good in the world. The world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that we do together, because together we can make a difference. And the Great Spirit knows now is the time to dig in and start making a difference. All power to the people. Over and out. We want to thank you for watching the Live from the Heartland show. New episodes air every Friday beginning at 9 a.m. Central Time. Episodes air each following Thursday on CAN TV, 9 p.m. in Sweet Home Chicago on Channel 21 or streaming everywhere else at cantv.org. Audio episodes go live on WLUW each Saturday, 9 a.m. on the left end of your dial at 88.7 FM or streaming everywhere worldwide at WLUW.org. They're available on Apple and Spotify podcasts by looking up Live from the Heartland on either platform and are also broadcast on Lumpin' Radio each Friday at 9 a.m. on 105.5 FM and streaming at lumpinradio.com. I'm Michael James, and I'm glad to have been your host. Until next time, remember, do good in the world because the world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that we do together. All power to the people. Over and out.
Come to limb. Are you doing the best you can? Tell me, are you doing